Right, boys. Today we are going to meet a new verb. We have seen it kind of briefly before in stories, and you've been able to figure out the translation just by kind of using your logic. But we're going to make a note of it here, so we've got it in our books and we know exactly what it looks like when we meet it in a sentence. So, in your exercise books, you need to write the title, I was. Okay, so there's your first clue as to what we're meeting. On the left-hand side, we've got the verb that we already know. So this is the verb to be in Latin in the present tense. Okay, so we've got sum, es, est, sumus, estis, sunt. I am, you are, he or she is, we are, you plural are, and they are. Okay, so we use this verb when we're not describing someone doing something. It's not an action. You're just describing someone. So I am happy, you are sad, we are enemies, etc. Okay, and we've talked about these endings before. So remember, the present tense endings of a verb that does describe an action are o, s, t, mus, tis, unt. The endings of this verb are very similar. There's an m instead of an o, but then the endings are the same. S, t, mus, tis, unt. So what that means is, when you see this verb in a sentence, you know who the person is that's being described. So you see a mus on the end, you know it's we are. You see an unt on the end and you know it's they are. Okay. Now today, we are going to meet the past tense of this verb, and that's on the right-hand side. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratis, erant. First thing to notice, the endings of this verb are exactly the same as the endings of the present tense, which is very helpful because it means that we already, just by looking at that, know which person it is. We know eram is going to mean I something. We know eras is going to mean you something, etc. The era makes it the past. So instead of I am, it's I was. Okay? So here is the translation of this verb in full. Eram, I was. Eras, you were. Erat, he or she was. Eramos, we were. Eratis, you plural, were, and erant, they were. Okay, so all the people are exactly the same. It's just that the sum side of things is I am in the present tense, whereas the eram side of things is I was in the past tense. Obviously, you're probably going to see the right-hand column more often than the left-hand column because the stories that we read happened in the past. It's less likely that things are going to be happening in the present. So your first job is to write out not just the new verb, eram, eras, erat, but I do want you to write a little recap of the present tense, sum, es, est, sumus, estis, sunt, maybe at the top. Right, recap, so you know that that's the bit you already know, whereas on the right-hand side is the verb that you don't know. So pause the video, write this out neatly, and make sure you understand what's going on here. Okay, we're going to use these words to do a little bit of translation before I let you get on with the story. So here's some examples. Please write out the Latin and then the translations underneath. I will go through them with you. So puer erat in urbe would then mean the boy. Erat was up here, was in the city. So obviously in that table, it tells us that it means he or she was. We don't need to put in a he because we're given the nominative puer, so we just say the boy was. Okay. Second one, mercatores stulti erant. So we've got the merchants, and that was this one here, were stupid. And again, we wrote down that erant means they were, but we're given the they. We're not going to say the merchants, they were stupid. We can just say the merchants were stupid. Next one, in foro eramus. So the mus tells us it's we. So this is we were in the forum. And then the final one, we've got a mix of the tenses. So eram is that M ending, meaning I. So the first bit means I was happy. Nunc means now. Miser sum is the present tense, but it's still I, it's still got an M on the end. Now I am sad. Okay, so that's the verb eram, eras, erat, eramos, eratis, erant. Make sure you've got all this stuff written in and make sure you understand what we've just been through. So, the next thing we're going to look at is the story ad villam. And I'm going to show you how to get to this story in a way that will make it very easy to translate. So, firstly, type in this web address into your browser. So, cambridgescp.com. I imagine there's lots of you that have already been on this website, but just to check that we all know where we're at. You'll then see this web page. Go down to where it says Cambridge Latin course. Click on online activities, book 1. Go down to stage 12, because that's where we're at. And then the story that we're looking at, we've done tremores, we've done ad urbem, we're now looking at ad villam. So click on explore the story. So ad villam means to the house. I'm going to translate a little bit of this for you right now. So all you have to do is listen and make sure you understand what's going on. And then the rest of the story is yours to translate using this study tool, which makes things really, really easy. And I'll show you why. In case you didn't know already, if you click on a word in the story, so I've clicked on that word pavor, it will tell you underneath what that word means. It tells me that pavor means panic. It will also tell me whether it's nominative, accusative, or dative. So this one is nominative. And it will also tell me if it's singular or plural, which is really handy. So this one is singular. Okay, so you can literally click on any word and it will tell you what it means. It will tell you if it's singular, plural. It will tell you what case it is, all that kind of thing. Okay, so it can make it very easy. I'm going to whiz through a little bit first that you don't need to write down, and then you're going to finish the story off using this tool. So, in urbe pavor maximus erat. Let's start then. So follow the Latin as I go through. In the city was a very great panic. Ash was now falling thicker. Flames were everywhere. So this word ubique means everywhere. Caecilius and his friends, after they entered the city, look at that, intraverunt, perfect tense verb, but petibant is imperfect. So after they entered the city, they were seeking his house, villam. But the journey was difficult because many Pompeians were filling, complebant, the streets. Vias is plural. Caecilius, however, was bravely hurrying through the streets. So nubes iam densissima erat. The cloud was now very thick. That was a superlative. Densissima, very thick. Suddenly, Julius shouted, "You, hurry to the house. I, valeo, I do not feel well." Okay, so that ends in O, so it's an I verb. At once, he fell down unconscious. Exanimatus literally means out of his spirit. So he fell down unconscious to the ground. Clemens carried, portavit, perfect tense, Julius to the nearest temple, templum proximum. Okay, so we can scroll down a little bit. So we're here, to optime fecisti. You have done very well, Caecilius said to the slave. You saved Julius. Ego tibi libertatem promitto, the best line that a slave could hear from a master. I promise freedom to you. Tibi means to you. Tum Caecilius e templo discessit. Then Caecilius departed from the temple and ran to his house. So, in fact, I'll give you one more sentence. So, Clemens cum Julio in templo manebat. Clemens was staying in the temple with Julius, At last, Julius respiravit. He recovered breath or recovered consciousness. So if you think about your respiratory system is where you breathe from. So boys, you are now in charge of translating from where it says ubi sumus on line 15. This should be very straightforward because you can click, as I say, on any word and it will tell you what it means. Okay, so you should be able to figure out exactly what's going on. Rather than then sending me your translation, once you get to the end on line 25, I want you to complete a crossword. And if you can fill in all the answers on the crossword, that means you've understood the story. I'll attach that as a separate document. So this is what it looks like. Obviously, you might need to print this out or try and write it on your screen if you're able to, or type it in as best you can. Just do whatever you can do with this, okay? And that will test whether you've understood what's just happened in this very dramatic story.